Hey everybody, it's Savage Lands News coming back once again. Kicking off a new series today. It's going to be the introduction series. I'll be going over all of the champions eventually. Starting with the ones that I know very well. Hopefully going to be pulling in some people, experts in the community for the heroes that I don't know that well. We're going to start off with Rhinar. Topic of mine right now, the deck I'm playing right now. I'll probably segue into Dromai and Levaya and Bravo next. But if you guys know anybody in the community who are experts at those heroes, send them my way. If you're one of the experts at those heroes, send them, come reach out to me. Like to pull you on, we can kind of go over and it'll be fun. But today we're starting out with Rhinar. So you might be asking yourself, why would you play Rhinar? It's a hard question to answer sometimes. But right now, brutes are the only heroes in the game with Intimidate. Intimidate is a unique mechanic to them. It is a mechanic in which you remove cards from your opponent's hand so they can't defend with them. It's almost to some extent like a softer version of Dominate, where you kind of are forcing damage to go through. But it really disrupts their ability to block with the cards that they want to block with. Now, we don't have very many on hits, but over the course of a game, slowly making their turns worse by causing them to block with the wrong cards or just making them take additional damage that maybe they shouldn't have taken really does add up. It's a very powerful mechanic, and it does win games. Rhinar has a mid-range and aggressive playstyle. So there's two versions of Rhinar that normally float around. This very mid-range kind of defensive Bloodrush oriented Rhinar, and then there's an aggressive Rhinar. They call it the Cheetah package. Those are things like Wild Ride, Pulping, very aggressive, always kind of laying down all of your cards on the table. Another one of the amazing things about Rhinar is explosive turns, right? You can come in with a Bloodrush for 30-something damage, intimidate 2-3 cards out of their hand. It means that damage is going to go through. Your cards are big, they're heavy. Intimidate rips things out of your opponent's hand. You are penetrating the defense. Very aggressive. And Rhinar has a unique place in the meta game as an anti-control hero, right? It's kind of like how Dash is kind of a gatekeeper for if games go too long. Rhinar is the gatekeeper of control decks. If the meta were to go completely the opposite direction it is today, everybody's got all of the D-Racks in their deck, everybody's defending, Rhinar would be the standout choice because he would stop that from happening. He's got low living legends points, which is pretty big deal for certain people. If you pick up Briar right now, you maybe have like a month or two with her. Rhinar is going to be here for a while. He's picking up some steam lately, but very low on the living legends points, and hopefully he'll be here for a very long time. Scab skins is another interesting reason why you don't play Rhinar. It's probably the most unique legendary in the game, maybe next to like Storm Striders, in the way that it actually breaks the math of the game. It is a die roll, has some negatives, but the ability to have 2-3 action points as a response to what any other deck can do to you. Think, Arclight Sentinel. Rhinar is one of the only heroes who can just activate his legendaries and bypass it, right? And then the most important reason to play Rhinar is that you have to have bigger dice than your opponent, right? Rhinar has never been A tier, cult following. It takes a lot of time and investment to be good at Rhinar. You kind of got to be a little ballsy, right? So why not play Rhinar? Very meta dependent. Rhinar has bad matchups in the most aggro decks on average, right? He's also kind of a low-ish mid-tier hero on average. Recently, maybe doing a little bit better, but on average, not the best hero in the game. Believe it or not, Rhinar is very skill intensive. A lot of people can't just pick up Rhinar and play him effectively with the controlled variants, the discarding, really maximizing block values, right? Rhinar's not an easy hero to play. It's easy to throw all your cards down and try and watch the damage go through, but you're not going to win as many games as you would on, like, say, Fi, where you just throw your hand down, or Briar, you throw your hand down. There is a lot of skill in taking time to set up turns. Aggro, we already talked about it, not the best. And he has below rate damage on average outside of his combo piece turns, right? You know, you got Swing Big, which is huge damage. You've got Bloodrush Bellows. And then the rest of your cards are 2 for 6, which when you look at what some of the other decks are doing is a little bit below rate, right? You kind of have to cheat your way back through with Blood Rushes and combo pieces and Scab Skins to really catch up to what the other decks can do. And then, you know, I put it as a pro, but Scab Skins is also a con. It can end your turn immediately. Playing with Scab Skins puts a lot of pressure on you. You really have to maximize the value of Scab Skins over the game without leaning too heavy into it. And Scab Skins kind of does put Rhinar in a box where, you know, they can't give you too much because then you're just going to obliterate opponents, right? Same thing with Intimidate. It kind of puts Rhinar in a box. If Rhinar's ever the fastest hero, he will be the best hero bar none. He would be probably better than Starvo, right? If he could intimidate your entire hand and do more damage than any other deck, he would Living Legend in a month. So it kind of puts him in a little bit of a box. So if we were to look at the meta as of today, and we kind of look at our matchup spread, compared to a lot of other heroes, Rhinar is in a pretty okay spot. Now, he has a couple unfavored matchups, right? You'll note most of the aggro decks are down there at the bottom. Viserai is really bad. Katsu is really bad. Briar is really bad. Fi is pretty bad. And it just so happens 2 of those 4 decks are top tier right now, right? But you can win against them if you really, really tech your deck for it. Rhinar has a lot of skill matchups, though. And this is kind of what makes him a complex hero to play. Every one of those heroes in the middle, you can win and you can lose. And it's really how well you expressed yourself during that game. And there's always a little bit of luck in TCGs. But there are a lot of skill matchups. And your good matchups, the problem with Rhinar, though, they're not that great, right? I would say the only exception on that list is probably the Assassin, as with his or her card pool right now. You kind of just run that deck over. But even our best matchups, Oldhim, Dromai, Icelander, Levia, you can lose, right? We don't have the same kind of luxury that Prism does, or did, or some of these other decks does, where they flip their hero and you're like, oh, I got this, right? This is easy. You know, when Oldhim flips his hero, you're a little happier that it's not a Viserai, but you can lose, and you have to play your ass off. So, speaking of that, playing your ass off, right? What separates great Rhinars from average Rhinars? Blocking is in my number one opinion. Unless, and this is all kind of catered towards the more mid-range style of Rhinar, not the Cheetah style. The Cheetah style isn't that great at blocking. But what really separates good Rhinar players from bad ones is understanding value, right? How much value are you expressing every single turn? The maximum amount of damage you've done plus the damage you've protected yourself against. And you have to do that every single turn. You need to know what key cards to block, right? If a deck that you're playing into runs Snatch, it is often better to eat the middle amount of damage and stop the Snatch from hitting so they don't get the free arsenal. Mask of Momentum, how to stop them from getting free cards when they hit you. Briar, stop them from drawing. Oldhim and Icelander, stop the amount of frostbites and all of that kind of stuff you're going to be getting. It's complicated, right? You really have to understand the most effective way to deal damage and prevent damage against every single hero in the game, and you have to have their cards memorized. Arsenal control. The best Rhinar players will always have a pocket 2 cost, hopefully, card in their arsenal for when there's a Blood Rush. If you draw a Blood Rush and you don't have something in your arsenal, it is really detrimental to your game plan, right? You need to have an amazing card in your arsenal at all times, and you need to understand on certain turns when you need to block 9 and play your arsenal card, right? And it's kind of like this ebb and flow of always maximizing your arsenal. And then the next one would be sideboarding. So, you know, most heroes have like a pretty core deck, 50, 60, cards that they really only rotate a handful out here and there. My main Rhinar deck has 33 cards in its main board. And every other card comes in and out depending on what my opponent is playing. DRX, Oasis Respites, certain 3-cost attacks for 7, right, against 5. Arg Smashes, right? There's so many cards. Your counterattack cards like Erase Face, Command and Conquer, right? Each your anti-control cards like Alpha Rampage, or Barraging Beatdown, right? I change those out every single game against every single hero. My sideboard is never the same. Learning to control variance is probably the next one. You know, understanding how to control which card you're going to discard, what cards you need to block with. Understanding scab skins, right? The math behind scab skins, that you can map it out, right? I'll actually show you guys the math calculation. I'll flash it up on the screen somewhere here, and we can go into that later. But there's a way to understand the likelihood of hitting a 1 over the course of a game, depending on how many dice you've rolled, right? So all of these kind of things, you need to really grasp that to make sure that you don't just lose your way out of the game or discard the wrong card or whatever, right? And then scab skins, right? We kind of went over that math calculation. It does win you games, but it also loses games, right? This is why I always run Gambler's Gloves, because you need to understand the perfect times to use scab skins and when to use them against specific heroes. One of my favorite lines will probably be, you know, scab skins swing big into CNC. You know, like really, and that's like against Fi or Briar, right? Hit them with 8, they'll probably eat it, and then follow it up with a card that is disrupting their game plan to the point where they wish they didn't eat the 8, right? Or Savage Feast, right? When is Savage Feast worth playing versus when it's not worth playing, right? And the likelihood of hitting a 4 is 50% or 4 higher. So, you know, planning your turns around something you can't control is also difficult. So make sure you don't eat a bunch of damage for this amazing scab skins play, and then you get the 2, and now your whole turn is over, right? One of the most important skills, I also believe, is hand cycling, right? From turn 0, I will do everything in my power to arsenal a card and play the other 3. Whether that's overpitching, whether that's scab skinning. I want to dump all 4 cards. I want to put 1 in my arsenal, and I want to draw 4 cards, and I want to do that every single turn, because the more cards you play, the faster you get to your Bloodrush, and you win games with Bloodrush, right? Speaking of Bloodrush, maximizing your Bloodrush is the most important piece to Rhinar, period. It is our most powerful card. It is the only way we do above rate damage. If you play out a Bloodrush without any sort of plan, and you do 10 damage, you probably lost, right? You want to hit for 16 to 24 damage on every single Bloodrush. The only reason you'll ever hit for 16 is because you ended it on a CNC or an Erase Face in a matchup where you know that's going to be worth it, right? So those are the most important differentiations between good Rhinars and average Rhinars, in my opinion. So next, we'll go into some common play lines, patterns, defending situations. I'll see you there. Okay, so let's dive into Bloodrush, because I think this is the most important card, right? And then we'll get into some other play patterns and blocking and all of that kind of stuff. But let's start off with like my key rules of Bloodrushing, right? So if we were to look at this board state right now, and we look at our hand, the number one most important thing that you want is to have Bloodrush Bellows, a blue, and a 6. Right, that is in my opinion, the floor of what would be a good Bloodrush. Okay, you know, it can get better than that, right? You know, this would technically fire as a Bloodrush Bellows. You know, I would do this if it was kind of one of those games where I don't get another choice. But this is best case scenario as far as what you would want in your hand for a Bloodrush. Now I'm going to shuffle the deck because I'm going to attempt to illustrate some points here, right? So right now we have no Tunic available, and we have no card in our arsenal, right? Now, typically, I would not want to fire a Bloodrush in this state unless I am pretty confident that I'm winning. I just want to keep putting pressure, you know. But if I drew this card right now and my opponent started attacking me and there's a nasty on hit on the table, You know, it would really hurt to block with just, you know, let's just say this card, right? It doesn't really matter. But let's just say we had to block. Okay, our turn comes. This card goes away. We fire our Bloodrush. We play it, discard the only card. Intimidate goes on the stack. And now we have 2 resources floating, best case scenario. We're going to draw 2 cards here. And would you look at that? Would you look at that? We can't do anything. We're going to claw for 10, right? We're going to get no arsenal, and we're going to claw for 10. It's pretty bad, right? And if we just keep doing this over and over and over again, right? Shuffle. Let's just keep all 4 cards this time. Pitch, play. Doesn't really matter. They're both reds, but we'll do it. Discard, draw 2. Right? Pretty good hand. This is an amazing Bloodrush, right? We're going to claw. Claw. Play. 18 damage. 2 intimidates. Not bad. But if we loop this over and over again, we'll find out that over the course of a game, our Bloodrushes are going to whiff. Probably every other one, right? This doesn't work. Doesn't work, right? You'll see that in these cases, we'd end up having to block with this card. We'll just do it again. Pitch, discard, Bloodrush, draw 2. Right? Here we go again. We're going to get a claw and a claw. But if we were to just take it a little bit more patient, right? Let's just say, actually, this exact same hand. If we had Tunic available here, okay, we have the Intimidate on the stack, Bloodrush is here, we have 2 resources. We could go ahead and at least claw, spend our resources, Tunic, and come in for 8 and get an arsenal, right? That was just with the Tunic. That's how much better that turn got just with the Tunic. So let's rewind one more time. And we do this once again, but we're going to do this with a card in our arsenal. It could literally not matter what we draw now, right? Let's just get rid of this card. We blocked with it. Bloodrush, pitch, discard, 2 floating. Draw 2 cards. And look at that. We got a red, useless red, and a blue. And we can still claw, pack hunt. And if we had Tunic there, we could claw, pack hunt, pocket a D-react. So maximizing your blood rushes is incredibly important as Rhinar. And it's the main reason having these kind of triggers always available, something in the arsenal, Fendal Spring Tunic, right? We could loop this 1,000 times, but the quickest way you're going to lose a game is that big 20 push. They're at 19 health. They're getting ready to kind of beat the shit out of you, hit you with a bunch of cards, right? If you can do 19 damage to them and rip one card out of their hand, you're making them do a lot of weird things. They're gonna have to decide to go in reckless range. They have to decide whether or not they want to block some of your blood rush. You're gonna intimidate certain cards in their hand. They don't get to choose what they want to blood rush with, right? So over the course of a game, you won't end up, oh my gosh, what is this? You won't end up out of luck, right? Okay, so here's another blood rush hand. Let's just say we've done our due diligence here. We have our Fendal Spring Tunic. We have our Swing Big in Arsenal. We have none floating. We now get the luxury here. Absolute luxury. We can block with this card, right? To stop an on-hit. So we know just immediately looking at this hand that these are the 3 cards we want to keep. And this is our variable card, right? So if our opponent just sends vanilla damage at us, has an off turn, whatever, right? We'll keep this card. But if they end with a snatch or something that's going to give them more tempo, and on hit that might do something really devastating, right? We can block, keep our equipment, very important for blood rushes also, and continue on with our day, right? 2 floating, Draw 2 cards. It's terrible. We would hate to see this, but this is what it is. And now we can 20 damage Bloodrush. And interesting, watch this with Tunic, the blue, in an arsenal, Claw, Tunic, swing big, pocket the Bloodrush. If we didn't have Tunic there, if we didn't have swing big and arsenal, we would have lost this Bloodrush, or had the double Bloodrush, which is never that great, or literally claw and swing big and just put this in arsenal, right? But because of the patience in this game, because of the Tunic trigger, we did 20 damage and immediately got to keep our next Bloodrush, which we can kind of fire again with that choice, right? What are we going to do with this card? You could play it before, but so that's the Bloodrush example. So your big keys, right? I know it's kind of sloppy, it's all over the place, but I wanted to express it without, I could have just set up a video where I staged each one of the cards in order and showed how bad it would be. But that was with shuffling on Talishar. How important having a Tunic resource or a Heart and Cross Trap or whatever, right? A 2-cost attack in your arsenal is, right? It saved us from dumping a Bloodrush. If some certain games, if you lose out on that Bloodrush like we just showed, you lost. Sometimes doing only 10 damage on your Bloodrush is a game loss, right? Maximizing Bloodrush, the most important thing you can do. Okay, so let's talk about deck construction. So typically the place I start when I'm constructing a deck is an idea, right? Something, concept, right? You need to have a purpose of your deck when you're building it, right? So typically with Rhinar, you're going to start in one of two places, right? If you're going to go for that cheetah package, you're looking to obliterate your opponent as fast as possible, right? Deal above rate damage. If you're playing like the Bloodrush Bellows package, you're looking at building a list that is teched into the heroes in your meta that'll survive long enough to see 3 Bloodrushes or 2 Bloodrushes, and will win the game through that, right? So if we're revolving our deck list around Bloodrush, for Rhinar specifically, I'd start with the blues because they're your fuel. And Rhinar's blues are pretty bad, to be honest, right? So you're going to start with your blues. Typical Rhinar deck has somewhere between 17 to 20-ish blues. You can figure that out with your personal playstyle, your meta, if there's a lot of ice in your area, right? Whatever. So I'd start there. Then Rhinar really has most of his power from his reds, right? They're your unique cards. They do something purposeful. They're tangible. They have the reason you're playing them. And then for Rhinar is one of the only heroes in the game that like actively uses yellows, I believe. Most decks are moving away from yellows. The more cards get printed, you're going to see a lot of reds, a lot of blues. You're not going to see so many yellows. Rhinar has a weird deck building constraint. That is that you need 6s to power his hero power and his blood rushes. If you just put a lot of reds in your deck and a lot of blues, you're going to have a really hard time balancing out your blood rushes, right? And a lot of Rhinar's yellows are actually weirdly impactful. So Rhinar's a weird deck, right? So my list right now my world's list had 17 blues, 23 yellows, and 32 reds. And you're going to see there, another one of the constraints of Rhinar specifically is 6s. You want enough 6s to power your blood rushes and to power your hero power, but we don't have, enough to run a full 6 deck. That would be, if we had 66s, that would be incredible, right? But we don't, right? So typically, starting with your blues, in my list, I was running the only 6 blue that Rhinar has available, auto include. Reckless Swing, another auto include in my opinion. I win a lot of games with this card. This is a purposeful card. It ends games. It gets you across the finish line. It is amazing. And then because I was building the deck around blood rushes and I saw how well Clay and Ian did in Nationals, I went very much with their idea, right? A lot of blues that block 3, that intimidate for control matchups, and then I can drop at any time if I need to for a blood rush, whether I block with it or play it. So 0 cost blue, 0 cost blue, 0 cost blue. One card just to help fill out, like, in case you draw 2 blues on a Blood Rush and you don't have something to attack with. And then our only blue 6. Right? And those are all my blues. They're always in the deck. They're always there. I don't have any in the sideboard. And then I really focused on the reds. So, you're going to stick in whatever is prevalent to your playstyle. If it's cheetah package, you're going to do, pulpings, wild rides, stuff like that. Your blue might have been a tear limb from limb. If you're playing like the mid-range variant, you're going to want some cards like a Race Face, Cadaverous, Contraband, Command and Conquer. You're going to need your D-Reacts or Sigils, stuff like that. And then you're really sculpting your game plan with the reds, right? Like this is how you're putting your plan together. And then yellows just fill in the gaps, to be honest, right? Beast Within has a nice effect on it. Bloodrush Bellow is what the whole deck is built around. There's not going to be a Brute list without this card. And then you're just going to see here the best yellows that don't discard. But if you're running a discard variant, then you're going to want to put discard cards in, right? And equipment. So Rhinar doesn't have a plethora of equipment. You're going to have your standard Null Rune package if you think there's going to be wizards in the area, which there probably will these days. You're going to have Scab Skins, Gambler's Gloves, Skull Crushers as your kind of brute equipment. And then you're going to run either Mandible Claws or Club. And your helmet is kind of right now, you choose between Crown of Providence or Arcanite Skullcap. Crown of Providence being the better, in my opinion, of the two. And then your AB package, right? So, quick summary. Blues, start with your blues. Make sure your ratio is right. 17 to 20 is what it seems to be right now. Have your reds. Define your plan. And then fill in the gaps with your blues or with your yellows because you need the 6s. You need the ratios to be there. Like I said, this deck has around 36. Okay, so let's dive into some play patterns with these cards. Just kind of give examples of why I chose them, right? And how you need to build that idea of what your deck list should be. Okay, so let's get into some play patterns, right? These are kind of like your generic lines. We'll play into some kind of like maybe awesome lines, right? And after this, we'll get into blocking. Let's just say we're opening the game. It's the first turn. We go first. Rhinar typically likes to go first. So it's one of the few decks that can really cheat and damage turn 1. Going second is really not that big of a deal. You can put your tempo on the table, but going first, Rhinar and I would say like Viscera, Kano are some of the only decks that really, when they go first, they get to do something special sometimes. All right, so we'll do our turn. Tunic, draw 4. Okay, so for those of you who don't fully understand the power of Intimidate, Rhinar's Hero power just yet, this is just about the perfect turn 1. Okay, I mean, if this barraging was red, it'd be the most amazing. So typically in the first turn, what you're really looking to do is either put a card in arsenal, kind of set up, dump some of the bad cards in your hand, something along those lines, or do damage. And Rhinar is probably the best hero at doing damage on turn 0. So here you can see we have a blue, Alpha Rampage, a 6 to discard, and a Barraging Beatdown. So we will go ahead, play the Barraging Beatdown. It's going to buff our next attack by 3 if they don't block with 2 or more cards. And since it's turn 1, they don't have anything in their arsenal, so we know that if we Intimidate 3 times, this damage will be activated. We'll play Alpha Rampage, pitch a blue, and we'll discard this card, the only card left in our hand. Controlled variants, right? The 6 will go into the discard pile, which will activate Rhinar's hero ability. So this will Intimidate once. This card has Intimidate written on it, our specialization card, so we'll Intimidate twice. And this card right here has Intimidate written on it, so we'll have Intimidated 3 times. That means that our opponent, I don't know why it keeps clicking in, our opponent will be left with a single card in their hand. And this attack is now coming in for 3 plus 9, 12 damage. So if you do the math, if they have a 3 block card in their hand, we're coming in for 9. 9 damage on turn 0. It's pretty incredible. Now, obviously, the downside of this play is that you don't get an arsenal. It's true. But doing 9 uninteractable damage on turn 0, the turn that they really would block because they're just going to redraw their whole hand, is pretty insane, right? So then we would go ahead, pack our little cards here, and go to their turn. So looking at our hand, we have a yellow barraging, pretty okay. You know, that's a decent arsenal target. We have Savage Feast, a blue, also a D-React that does 2 damage, but it is card negative. It is worse than blocking with 2 cards. It's mostly for killing, right? And a yellow 6. So let's just say our opponent attacks. We value our hand. You know, the cleanest attack we can do here is 6. We can play barraging and pitch this yellow for a claw for 6. Or we can go for the spicy play, which would be the Savage Feast and Scab Skins, right? Keep a blue, play Savage Feast, discard this 6. So that enables us to evaluate the game state, right? Looking at this hand, we immediately have 2 choices. It is a safe play of 6, block with 2 cards, play the Riled Up, pitch the Reckless Swing, or a more risky play with a higher payoff of playing Savage Feast and using Scab Skins. So it really depends on what our opponent threw at us. So let's just say they throw some pretty generic damage at us, and they end with a Snatch, and we go ahead and we block that Snatch out, put a counter on our Scab Skins, and go to our turn. We roll Scab Skins. Boom, let's just say we got a 4. Beautiful. We got our beautiful 4. Pitch, play, discard. Intimidate goes on the stack, so they can only block with 3 cards this turn. We have 2 floating. And would you look at that? This is my absolute favorite thing to ever happen. Right? I do this a lot more often than I would really expect. But this is going to come in for 6. They don't know what's in our hand, right? A lot of our red attacks are 6s. You know, we could pull anything from a barraging, a blue, an arsenal target, right? Worst case scenario, we draw a card that we put in our arsenal and we claw. So they're down to 3 cards. If they decide to block this out, we're going to nail their arsenal. If they don't block it out, they're going to take 6 damage and now have to block an entire CNC and keep 2 cards, one of which was intimidated, so they didn't get to pick what it was. Or they're going to give us armor and a card, right? So that line, pretty incredible. You know, swing big works, erase face works. Any 2 costs that you have in the deck works with that play, right? So go ahead, let's draw up again. Okay, so this is an interesting one, right? Looking at our hand is pretty average. You know, this is a high priority arsenal target. This is, you know, a decent arsenal target, and this is a really good arsenal target. But we have no real attacks. We can't pay for this with that unless we seriously pitch all 3 cards. So looking at this hand immediately, my thought would be, okay, we're going to play this card. We're going to pitch, hopefully, this Beast Within. We're going to keep this for arsenal, and we're going to block with the Sink Below. Now, obviously, what they throw at us really matters. You know, if they force a nature, snatch, when they have boots active, you know, I'm going to block. I'll probably block with all of these and try and get this in arsenal, right? That would be my backup plan. But if things go okay, I would trade 1 Sink Below. Wouldn't really bother to sink anything here. Everything here has a game plan. I would play this, put an Intimidate on the stack. They'd probably block it or take 6, most likely taking 6, and I would arsenal this target. Okay. Let's see how this pays off, right? Ooh, okay. So our next turn, Bloodrush. I'm going to do everything in my absolute power to not block here, okay? Now, depending, again, it's always what they throw at you. Depending on what they throw at me, I'm going to do my best to not block, right? I want to keep this hand. What would be even more amazing is if I can roll my Scab Skin, since we still have Gambler's Gloves here, and try and get that 4 and have a Tome of Fiendal Bloodrush Bellows turn. So let's just pretend everything goes well. But what's really amazing is having this in Arsenal, taking that time to set this up, is even if our Bloodrush gets pretty messed up with having the block here, using our equipment, getting rid of 1 card, we might be able to salvage it. But let's just pretend. Go through our turn, pitch our High Roller, play our Bloodrush Bellows. Oh, so important. Let's back it up. You should always roll first. I nearly made a mistake, right? Why should you roll first? So we can plan our turn. Wow, we got 2 action points. So that means now we can play Tome of Fyendal as our backup plan. Would you play Tome of Fyendal before playing Bloodrush? No. No, you wouldn't. Why? Because you might draw 2 non-6s that you can't get rid of. You might draw a D-React or something. And we want to make sure we pitch this blue, right? So we're going to pitch this blue first. Play Bloodrush. Shuffle. Discard. Intimidate goes on the stack. We still have 2 action points left. We have 2 resources floating. The Intimidate will resolve. They have 3 cards to block with now. And we'll draw 2. That's a lot of damage. Now, looking at this hand, we can't really take advantage of these 2 action points outside of Tome of Fyendal right now, right? So I would opt to play Tome of Fyendal, go down to 1, draw 2 cards. Oh my goodness. We just healed for 5, intimidated, and now we can claw. 5 damage. Claw. 5 damage, up to 10. Intimidate another card if they've blocked. And we can play Swing Big. So this is the maximum damage you could probably get off of any sort of normal Blood Rush, right? 24, right? Assuming that they can't block the last one. Or you could not play this card, pitch it, and keep a Swing Big in Arsenal, which is an incredibly valuable card to put in your arsenal too, right? So that worked out amazing. Huge Blood Rush turn. Huge tempo. Still have a D-React, or still have a huge card in our arsenal after a Blood Rush? Yes, right? Ooh. The not great, ever ruining Blood Rush. All right. So how do you deal with a situation like this? Okay. This is a hard one, right? Depending on the matchup that you're in, you can either accept that you're going to pitch this Blood Rush away with that, whether that's Crown, whether that's whatever, Crown, a D-React, you're just going to pitch it, right? And you probably won't see it again if it's like a Fi matchup, or a Briar matchup, or a, aggressive matchup. If it's like an old him or somebody slow, then you can pitch this away and it's not that big of a deal. But you really have 2 options, and it's entirely up to the game state. If you are struggling to stay alive, then you're probably not going to have the time to keep both of these Blood Rushes, put one in Arsenal, and try and hold on to both, right? So your main option, and why this piece of equipment made Rhinar so much better, is to crown it away. That's plan 1, right? Or backup plan 1. Plan 2 would be to hold on to dear life, play block with this card, play this Swing Big, put one in Arsenal, and then that's the other plan, right? Try and hold on to 2 Blood Rushes, and if we draw, right, you can see that it does. Holding on to Blood Rushes is pretty hard sometimes, right? This is a pretty bad Blood Rush, but we could. But it's really up to the game state. So here is one of the hardest decisions as a Rhinar player, and it's really a skill, is to understand if you can suffer through some bad turns of holding onto these Blood Rushes, or if you're going to have to dump it, right? So there's some main play lines, right? Pretty self-explanatory. The problem with Rhinar is you could always get a hand like this, right? Double Sigil, D-React, Pocket, But it's all about the balance of finding aggression and defense, Okay. So thanks for hanging out with me today, going over Rhinar, one of my favorite heroes. I'll be posting all of my deck lists down below, some budget lists, some blitz lists, some CC lists. So you can go ahead, take all those resources, give him a try. He's really, really fun hero to play. And like I said, I'll probably be doing Dromai next. But I'm looking for people in the community, anybody who, is interested in reaching out, who's done pretty well on one of the heroes. I'd love to bring you on and we could talk about your favorite hero and your game plans and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.